Hello and welcome to PocketGamer.biz's video news roundup of the week. This is the week ending the 9th of August 2013. It's the summer, not really in the UK, rather grey at the moment, but it's not been a vast amount of news this week. We've had Casual Connect last week, and we have the big German game show, Gamescom and GDC Europe starting a week Monday. So I think people are keeping their news back a little bit. We have been seeing, for people who like numbers like me, it's been the a financial kind of quarters kind of week. So it's always kind of fascinating to get the every 3 months we get a look at the companies who on the various stock exchanges around the world. They have to create their, give out their figures, so kind of investors can see if they're doing well or not. So we've had quite a lot of that this week. So that's really what I'm going to focus on at the moment. So obviously we kind of talk a lot about the mobile games industry being in massive explosive growth, and obviously for some companies it is, but what goes up must come down, and you have big growth, and it's kind of how do you sustain that growth is kind of an interesting thing to consider. And what we've seen actually with a lot of companies who are giving out their financials is they've been growing quite fast over the last 12 months, and now they're kind of sales are kind of plateauing, and profits are kind of maybe declining a little bit. So let's have a look through some of these. So one company that announced this was announcing its Q2 figures. So basically everyone's giving out figures for the months April to June 2013. So Come To Us, one of the big Korean publishers, it's been growing very quickly over the last 12 months, but its sales figures for Q2 are actually down 8% to $18 million. And even though the Korean market is still growing quite fast and has grown very fast, it's kind of you're kind of getting this competitive effect now. So particularly a lot of growth has come from the Kakao games platform, which started only 12 months ago, and was just 1 or 2 games being released a week, and now we're seeing 5 or 6 games released a week there. So while there's a lot more throughput of games happening, there's a lot more competition within games companies to get their games into players' kind of hands. And the growth of Kakao hasn't, obviously Korea is only a certain number of millions of people, so that's not grown as fast as the number of games being released every week. So that's had quite a big impact on Come To Us. And I think we'll see with a lot of the Korean companies now, for the last 12 months they focused a lot on Korean growth, and now they kind of readjusting themselves. So obviously Korea fairly small on a global basis. So we kind of look to see companies like kind of Come To Us, kind of refocusing a bit internationally. The other interesting thing for Come To Us, it's kind of growth on something like Kakao has come very much from kind of very simple social type games, and it's also had quite a good track record with hardcore RPGs, not on Kakao, but just more generally. Both those kind of categories have shrunk over the last 12 months, but it's seen quite a big increase in its kind of its sports genre has been kind of quite steady. So it does baseball games and has had a golf game that's come out that's done quite well for it internationally. So that's Come To Us. Also, kind of staying in Asia, there's DeNA, which is one of the massive Japanese social gaming platforms. It's announced its figures, so let's have a look at those. So same period, it's April to June this year. So its sales are actually up 10% to $526 million. Obviously, a much bigger company. It makes its own games, runs a big platform. It's interesting though. Still, most of the vast majority of its revenue still comes from Japan, and even in Japan, 25% of its revenue still comes from what we would call feature phones, i.e. they're not Android or Windows Phone or iPhones. That's changing quite fast. The big kind of move for DeNA over the last 2 years, really, since it moved into the States and bought NG Moko, is kind of expanding internationally. And now it's for the last quarter, it had $80 million of sales outside Japan, which may not seem large in context of $500 million, but it's said for the first time it was profitable outside Japan, or that division was profitable outside Japan in June. And then China's growing very fast, obviously again from a very small base. But again, interesting for DeNA. So while its revenue was up 10%, everyone likes to see revenue up 10%. Its operating profit was down. So I guess you kind of see this thing where your growth is quite big, but you're kind of spending more than you're kind of generating kind of free cash. That's DeNA. Let's have a look at some other companies. So one company I've followed for a long time now is Glu Mobile, based in San Francisco. and that's being a mobile company, being back in the days of Java and Brew, it was making kind of games based on movie franchises, putting them out through carrier decks. It's had to have a really big transition. It's taken it a long time. It's moved from free to play. It's moved heavily into kind of iOS, Android, free to play. It's basically been running its own original IP now. It's not really using any external IP at all. It's a fairly large company. Its turnover, depending on the years, has been $75 million to $100 million. So, that's not insubstantial. Having massive problems, though, kind of transitioning from different business models and keeping its sales up and certainly keeping profits. I think it's had like 1 or 2 profitable quarters in the last kind of 5-6 years. So that's the big focus for it over the last couple of years, has been getting to break even and profit, because it has quite a lot of cash in the bank even now. So it announced its revenue. Q2 revenue was down 17%, and it's making a loss. It still has $19 million still in the bank. It expects to end the year. It has $14 million in the bank. Let's get it right, and it expects to end the year with $9 million in the bank. But its losses progressively each quarter just mean at some point it's going to either have to kind of hit break even, or reduce its costs so it can be profitable. It's going to have to go to the market again and try and refinance. And I think as I say, sometimes we get a bit carried away with Supercell's doing this and the King are doing this. Those kind of companies have a great advantage that they're coming from like nowhere with very low cost bases. It's very hard for these companies like Glu, even like EA and Gameloft to a degree, who've come from a pure paid games, certainly a carrier based kind of games kind of market from the last 5 years ago, and coming suddenly free to play is completely different. You're working through app stores, you're working in a completely different way, and it's very hard. It's the whole kind of cliche, I guess, of rebuilding a plane when you're in flight. So there's a kind of a quick look at some of the financial stuff. It's not just been about financials. So I guess the big game has come out, and I think we'll be talking about this a bit more. Highly anticipated, The Drowning has come out from DeNA's The Scattering studio out of Stockholm. We're having lots of debates within Pocket Gamer about whether it's a good game or not, whether the new shooter control mechanics are what kind of hardcore gamers want. Certainly we're going to have we'll be looking at the monetization techniques, which are, I think, fair to say, very sophisticated in future weeks. So if you're looking for a game this weekend, I think The Drowning is the one to be playing. And looking at our kind of regular features of PocketGamer.biz, this week our Monetizer looked at Game of War, which is from Machine Zone. Again, another very experienced free-to-play games company, and very sophisticated monetization. It's quite a different game. It's kind of a typical strategy, city building, join an alliance, build armies, attack other kind of cities type game. So we've become used to that over the years. And kind of graphically, it's kind of more of like almost like a menu-based kind of game, kind of more kind of static. It's not like certainly not like a first-person shooter game. But it's very interesting looking at monetization methods and kind of employing some of these very simple equations that we're using for Monetizer. So it's already a successful game. It's only just recently launched, so we definitely think we'll see it becoming more successful. But we can already see it's successful. It's been top grossing in a number of countries, top 10 already. And we were looking. So we create this kind of. I've come up with this kind of a monetization coefficient, which basically looks to see how kind of depending on how you describe it, how aggressively or how kind of technically it's trying to monetize, and it came up with a number of 300, which is pretty high. So anything over 100 I tend to think is kind of quite sophisticated monetization in the way it's trying to kind of encourage, manipulate, however you want to use the term. So that's another one to check out, Game of War from Machine Zone. And on a side note, we also had our Pocket Gamer summer conference this week in Manchester. So there's a hilarious, if rather long video of some of us trying to play football or soccer, as you Americans would say it. So that's on the PocketGamer.biz YouTube channel. So check that out. And also, as recently launched, we've launched a Tumblr kind of channel as well, which is particularly looking at our monetization techniques, and looking at kind of lots of screenshots and kind of like that's trying to be like a channel where we're kind of trying to. Some of the knowledge we're kind of gaining, trying to put it out there. So check that out. That's on our Tumblr channel. That's all for this week. Catch you next week.